Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. Mike, we have to jump right into this because we have so many questions this week with fall camp just right around the corner. I know a lot of people want to know about Razorback football, and that's exactly what our first question is. Pig's Feet wants to know, what does Arkansas football need to do in order to compete for national championships? And do you think it is possible to ever reach that level again?
You know, honestly, we don't get a lot of questions like that, and it gets right to the heart of things, right? Just skip over all the other stuff.
Are we going to win a national title? There you go.
Circumstances have changed a lot since the first one was won in '64. A whole different set of parameters. Possibly, I would hate to say never. A lot of things would have to change. If you go back to '64, here are the basic things you have to have. You have to have the right head coach. You have to have a really good staff, 2 good coordinators, and you got to be loaded with talent, okay? But that '64 team had something that doesn't exist now for Arkansas. They played in a conference where you had to beat Texas maybe, and it would vary. Some years it'd be A&M, some years Baylor. It wasn't some years Houston. But there were usually only 1 or 2 other teams from Texas. So maybe you had to have 3 tough games. Not saying the others were always a pushover, but really tough games. And if you do that and you're undefeated and you go to the Cotton Bowl, you're probably going to win the national championship, which is what they did. Now what happens is you look at this 2024 schedule with the 9 games. We've talked about this before. Every 2 years, you're playing every team in the SEC. Here's what that means. Every season, you're going to have 4 to 6 conference games that are really tough. Now, you can win all of those but 2. Just lose 2 conference games. Arkansas, if you're Arkansas, maybe you get to the SEC championship game, maybe. But if you lose that game, you've got 3 losses, there's no way you're going into the playoffs. And honestly, the way it is right now, Arkansas almost has to have like an 11-1 season, regular season, and then if you play in the championship game, it'd be like 12-1 to even be in consideration. You get 2 losses, they're probably not going to put you in the championship game. It's a little easier once in 2024 they expand to 12 teams, so it make it a little easier.
Yeah.
If they would go to 16, that would help a little better. And I think they need to do that because because of TV, they're creating all of these tough matchups every week. And so you got to make it a little bit more like basketball, like with Eric Musselman. He doesn't worry about whether he wins the SEC or the SEC tournament. It's all about postseason play. And that should be the way it is in football. But it's just not because you're playing fewer games and it's harder to get into the playoffs because there are fewer playoff teams. So if they expand it, that makes it a little easier. Here's the biggest issue I see right now. It's publicity. It's who you are in the minds of the national media. Arkansas is nothing to these people. We talked about this last week with SEC media, and this is the SEC media. They don't know what's going on here. Most of them don't have a clue. And how do you change that? Here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have a top 5, top 10 finish 3 or 4 years in a row. Almost did it under Petrino. They were getting there. That's how you start to get noticed because it takes a while for a program to register on the brain of a lot of these people. So if they were able to do that, so how do they do that? Well, Sam Pittman inherited a mess. It was coming out of the worst period in the history of Razorback football. People still don't give him enough credit for how far he's come because they act like it doesn't matter where they were when he was hired, and it does matter. But he's improved recruiting. It's getting better every year. He's hired a staff and let them know you have to recruit. There's none of this, you're a real good D-line coach, so I keep you. You got to be a really good D-line coach and recruit and bring guys in, and if you don't, you lose your job. So that's good. Mm-hmm. Now this whole coordinator thing has happened. This is his first shift from his original coordinators. If it works out the way I think it is, then he's moving forward because he needed to move past those 2, even though he said he didn't want to lose them. You're getting to the coordinator part that you have to win a national championship. He can't do this himself. I don't think he's going to be around long enough. If he'd taken this job at age 50, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think he's here 2 or 3 more years. Here's what he can do. He can continue to improve the program by better recruiting, winning games, getting noticed, and then hand it off to the next guy. So how do you win a national championship? Hunter Yurachek, who's really good at hiring coaches, he's proven that he is. He has to make the right hire after this. And what will happen, if it's done right, is unlike when Pittman took the job, in which he's trying to build out of nothing, you will have, it was almost be like handing off in a relay in which you were in last place, and all of a sudden they got you into 3rd place, almost 2nd place. You're handing it off to your next guy, and he's ready to take off.
I love that
If you hire the right coach, he maybe can get you to that next level. But you're going to have to win games and get respect and stay ranked. You can't do this when you're in the polls, then you're out of the polls. You can't do this when you're getting some 4 stars but never a 5-star. You got to up your rankings in recruiting. And that technically is not the thing, is where you're ranked, but it does reflect where you're at. So you got to improve recruiting. And if you can do all that stuff, I think eventually it's possible, but a lot of things have to happen. Now, the good thing is those things at least are reasonable in your mind.
Yeah.
If you go back to that period after Petrino, and this is the closest we've come since Frank, and maybe the 79 team, they came close, was Petrino, because he had the 3 years and he was building the program, but there was stuff going on that we didn't know about that was going to blow all that up anyway. And then it just fell apart. So now can you get that back up with the right coach and then pass it on to the next coach? It might even take a 3rd coach down the road. But you win a national championship by having a program with sustained success. You can't go up and down all the time. No. You got to stay up there to get noticed. So that, for instance, when you're after a certain player, a high school guy, and he's not from around here, he doesn't never heard of you.
Yeah.
So he won't even visit.
Yeah. Exactly. They don't know Fayetteville. They don't know Arkansas because their name isn't being talked about every single year.
Exactly.
And they're not in the conversation. But Sam Pittman, I really do think he's building that. I think
we'll see.
You're
this year's
getting
a
there.
big step.
I know, it definitely is. But you're so right about that, Mike. People all the time think that it doesn't matter. Oh, you just need to get the talent in. You just need to get the talent in.
A lot of factors beyond that.
But what you're saying, it's a slow burn, too. We're in this world right now of instant gratification where it's like next year we have to win a national title, or no, we'll go out and get a new coach. It's sometimes the slow burn that people don't realize it's happening behind the scenes, and that's what makes great coaches and great programs.
I also think baseball and basketball can help.
Yes, true.
If baseball were to win a national championship next year.
Oh, absolutely.
If then basketball could jump back in and win one. Then you've got pow, a double hit, gets the national media looking at Arkansas, even though it's not football. Then it gets your name out there.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem right now. Arkansas is just sort of, if you look at a lot of these stupid polls that are on there, Boomer Schnoomer or whatever those things are.
You say Boomer Schmoomer? I love that.
All this stuff that's on the internet. Most of them don't know what, Arkansas is like nothing in that.
Yeah. Sometimes they're last.
Yeah. So you just have to change that. And the only way you change that is it's almost like you have to, I used to talk about getting into the upper room of the SEC. Ooh. The upper room would be 1, 2, 3, right in there. They don't invite you into the upper room. They don't say, hey, they don't open the door and go, who wants to come into the upper room next? It doesn't work that way.
No.
You go up and you kick the door down and say, I'm in the upper room.
I love that.
That's how you have to do that. So
I love that.
Can they do it?
Can they do it? That is the real question, and that we can't answer right now. But, Mike, I love that. And you're right about baseball and basketball helping. Look at what LSU. Look at what happens when you have multiple programs winning national titles.
And it's sad that the track doesn't help, but it doesn't.
I know,
they don't pay any attention to that. The national media doesn't care.
I know. Razor Alex 88 asks, what are your thoughts on the conference realignment that has taken place in the last couple of years? It is so weird to think that both USC and UCLA will be in the Big Ten soon.
Yeah, I don't like it, but there's not anything I can do about it. I don't.
You can't throw a bunch of money at these teams, right, to stay?
It's happening because of money. Schools ADs have figured out that we've reached the point where TV revenues are about to surpass live gate and contribution revenues. When I first started in this business, the TV money was like 80-20. And now it's about to be more money you get from television than you do from this other stuff. So everybody wants that money. And there's only one way to get it, and that's you've got to have great matchup games every week. And you do that by expanding your conference and getting teams like Texas and Oklahoma to come in to an already strong conference. So same thing with the Big Ten. They take the two plum names out of the Pac-12, which was hurting anyway, suck them in over there, and it makes it look even better. I still think we're eventually going to end up with 4, not 5 conferences. I think the Pac-12 is going to dissolve
probably
into a variety of the other conferences. And once you do that, then you're going to end up with 96, maybe whatever you want to call it. I still like calling it Division I teams.
Yeah.
And then that's what you'll have. And if you have a 16-team playoff eventually, then I think that works better. But I don't like all this stuff, but life evolves, and it doesn't evolve always the way we want it to. And you have to adjust. Even if I wasn't in the business, even I'm Joe Blow sitting out there watching on my TV, what am I going to do, turn it off? If you like college football, you're still going to watch it. You're just going to gripe about it.
Yeah, I mean, there were people that didn't like Texas and OU wanting to join the SEC.
Exactly.
There were people that did not want that to happen.
I don't want them in here. Get out.
Yeah, I mean,
Stay where you
there
were.
are times where I'm like, you can have fun over
but
there.
But nobody asked me, and they're not going to, so I deal with it.
Yeah, Mike, you don't have to have $1 billion laying around anywhere.
No.
We can throw it. No, maybe a couple billion. No, I'm just kidding.
Figure out.
You'll figure it out. Razorback wants to know, when does football camp begin, and is it open to the public like the good old days? Have company coming into town and doing entertainment planning? Wow, I wish it was open to the public.
I hope that you have fun entertaining your friends, your company, but you won't be doing that by watching football practice. First of all, I don't remember a time when fans could go to fall practices. Maybe a long time ago. It's hard for me to remember, but I don't remember that. There's always been a very distinct difference between spring football and the fall. So you can go back decades, and I don't think, now if you knew somebody, if you were a parent,
you could get in,
you could get in, but if you're just a fan, you go, hey, can I come in here? No, you can't. They don't have enough room in there, for one thing. If they open that thing up to anybody, it would be too crowded. So what you're going to get is the media is going to go in there for 15 or 20 minutes, and we're going to see what we think we can see. And then we're going to try to put all this stuff together and listen to things and listen to what certain people say in press conferences, athletes, coaches, or whatever, and try to figure out what's going on when we're not really there. And that's the best you're going to get. You know, you're going to get information passed through us based on a little bit of what we see and a little bit of what we hear and a lot of speculating about what we hear. Because you hear something, you can go, oh, I think that means this. And then you start to try to follow that line. So it's a month-long period. It'll go by fast, and then there'll be a real season, and then you can actually watch the games.
Yeah,
Far superior than worrying about practice.
Very true. There was a Razorback fan that told me, and I can't remember who it was, that said they did sometimes open fall camp practices, but that could be wrong. I don't know.
What?
They were saying that they did at one point they were able to go. So they may have known someone. I may have to go back in my messages.
Might have been a scrimmage at
or
some
something,
point.
or a scrimmage
Just
or something.
everyday practice, no.
No,
I mean, maybe,
right.
But boy, that's going back a ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then fall camp starts, the players report this Thursday. And then
starts Friday.
Starts on Friday. That's why I just wanted to make sure we answered that as well. BK Jax asks, what are your thoughts on the freshman QB Singleton? I think he'll get some major minutes this year. Ooh,
well,
major
minutes. I like him. Because when he came here, my image of him was he's more of a runner. You know, he's like early KJ. When KJ came in, he's more of a running guy that can throw some. He's a better passer than I thought. He's got much better touch on his short passes than KJ did as a freshman, okay? Probably not quite the runner he is. A different kind of runner. He's not a power runner. He's quicker. Major minutes? Are you serious? The only way he plays major minutes is if KJ gets hurt, and then Jacoby Criswell, who's the backup, gets hurt. I hope that doesn't happen.
Oh, please no.
He will likely play in the first 2 games because you've got some mid-major opponents in the first 2 games, and then I think there's one later in the year that he might have a chance to play in. So my guess is he redshirts. He doesn't play. He can play in technically 4 games. I'm thinking maybe 3. I mean, if Arkansas is really good and they start blowing some people out, that's when you can get in. But if it's a close game, you're not.
Yeah, I think major minutes, but I think we will see him this year, like you said.
But
like
not
we'll
major
see
minutes.
Yeah, not
hopefully,
major minutes.
Hopefully not major minutes.
Oh my gosh, please don't put that on us, BK Jacks. Do not want that at all. Code Hog wants to know, how does the football field look? Do we have new grass?
No, we do not have new grass. I really think she, because I don't know.
Okay.
If it's
Code Hog. Yeah, he or she. Yeah.
I don't know whether it's a male or female, but the point is, you're probably getting that mixed up with soccer because they got a new field,
they did,
and there's been publicity about it over the last 3 or 4 weeks. There's been video.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
They're putting it down. It looks really good.
Yeah.
The other part that's confusing is whenever this Garth Brooks concert was. Do you know how long ago that came?
Last April.
Whenever it was.
Yeah, last April.
Whenever it was, there was a statement made that if they tear the field up, he will replace it. And a lot of people thought, well, they got new grass last year because of that. Well, they didn't, because when it was all over and they cleared everything off, I was told they looked at the field and said, hey, there's nothing wrong here. So it was fine, and it's still fine. I didn't go over and actually look at it, but I know the university has really good physical plant people that work with grass. And it's in all of their grass fields, not just for football. They have as good a grass as I've seen. A&M may be a little better because they brag all the time about their grass, and they're further south where it's hotter and grass grows better. But I think the grass will be fine.
Yeah, Arkansas's field looked gorgeous last year, and that was after the Garth Brooks concert because it was last year before last football season.
They put a big tarp down and it didn't tear anything up.
Yeah, I think that was probably fine. But Garth, he should have still maybe used that money to donate. You know, we could have gotten something cool from.
I'm just telling you. They told me over at the athletic department they didn't replace the grass.
All right.
Didn't have to.
Well, there you go. Redleg says in 2011, Joe Adams won the first annual JET Award as the nation's best return specialist. In 2012, the JET Award began presenting trophies retroactively to past return specialists. They have yet to give out their award for 1964, which, in my opinion, should absolutely go to Ken Hatfield. What are your thoughts on this? And is there any way the UA could lobby for Hatfield to get this honor?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, usually the sports information people are the ones that do this. Now, when this comes up, whenever, I don't know when the year is when they're going to honor 64 punters, best punters. But when that happens, you would think the athletic department would start sending out information to whoever votes on this. Yeah. I think they will. That's part of what they do. And so, yes, they can influence that. What little I was in '64, I was still in high school, so I don't remember a whole lot about that. But I know that Hatfield was a great punt returner. He ran one of the most famous punt returns of all Razorback history against Texas and scored on those guys. And I think he was, as I recall, the top punt returner in college football that year. So hopefully it will be him.
Great.
If it's not, somebody's cuckoo.
Or the UA didn't send out lobbying materials
what they should, but
on
I think they
him.
will.
I hope so as well. When do you know when they announced that?
I don't. I don't know what year it is. I didn't even know about this. The guy.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just taking it as his word that they're doing this.
Yeah, Redleg, that sounds awesome. I want to look more into that because I'd like to see when they honor them.
You do that, and then you can give us an update.
I will. I'll look into it. I'll give you an update next week. Rob's 4516 says Coach Pittman and Kennedy have the reputation of being two of the best O-line coaches in college football. What do you think it is about their coaching that gained that distinction, Mike?
Well, when Pittman came to Arkansas under Bielema, he already had a pretty good reputation, but he really sort of came into his own here. He had some really good offensive lines. He specialized in having big guys that could also move and were athletic. And then when he went to Georgia, that's when he sort of developed. I think they would, because of his recruiting too, because it's not just your coaching. I think it was a kind of a consensus. He's probably the best offensive line coach in the country, which got him a head coaching job. You know, doesn't happen a lot that an offensive line coach, without becoming a coordinator first, becomes a head coach. And so his reputation was what? He got results. You know, they were winning under him, and it was clearly the offensive line that was doing it. So he's a recruiter, but also an X's and O's guy. Knew who to put where players to do where and do this and do that, and it all worked. And the players liked him, and that's a big thing. Players have always liked this guy, and that's huge with a coach. Now, Kennedy, he started off at a couple of Division II schools, ended up as a grad assistant under Pittman at Georgia. That's kind of where his career took off. And then he was at a couple of other schools. Tulane was one of them before he came here.
Right.
And in his second year here, he was a finalist for the Broyles Award. Mm-hmm. So he's getting results. And last year, Arkansas ended up with over 3,000 yards rushing. That's the first time that's happened since 2007. So it's the same thing. Your reputation is based on your ability to recruit and the results of what you're doing. And if your guys are rushing for over 3,000 yards in a season, it means you got more than one back.
Yeah.
You know, because nobody, I don't think that one guy's going to rush for 3,000 yards in one season. Yeah. So that's what it's very similar between both of those guys. And does it help that your head coach was a great O-line coach? Sure, he's with you every day.
Yeah, he's learning from Coach Pittman, and he's even said that last year before the season, like he has learned so much from working with Coach Pittman over the years, and I think that truly, I mean, honestly, that's a great relationship to have. I know Sam Pittman is hands-on with that O-line.
But this is going to be a big year for him too, because you got to replace your 2 tackles, and that's pretty important.
Oh yeah.
And so we'll see how that goes.
But Sam's pretty confident in the O-line. I like it. The confidence
he
had at
results.
I know you do, Mike. But I like when Sam Pittman's confident about an O-line. It makes me feel good about it. Hang Ten Hog says, we don't really hear a lot about him these days, but I've always felt that Gary Anderson was a special talent at running back. Any interesting memories of his playing days?
Yeah, the 81 Texas-Arkansas game, Texas was #1 in the country, and they came in here, and Anderson played a key role in that. Arkansas steamrolled them 42-11, just killed them. And it really wasn't a great season for Arkansas. That was clearly the highlight of that year. But Gary Anderson, I think he caught a touchdown pass, maybe ran for another one. He caught several passes, ran pretty well in the game. He was a speed back, and he was one of these guys that he didn't always turn it on. He had fast, and then he had fast that would astonish you, but you didn't see that very often. But when you did see it, you was like, whoa, what just happened there? John McDonald knew this, the legendary track coach at Arkansas, and he kept talking to him about, you don't know how fast you are. Let's see how fast you really are. Because John has always told me, come on now, those football players are not track guys. When you talk about speed, it's still not track speed. So he has him come over, and he works out a little bit, and they take him to the Southwest Conference indoor meet, which was always in the spring. And so I go to that. It's in Fort Worth. I want to see Gary Anderson, see what he can do. So he sticks him in a relay. I don't remember what distance it was, but it was a four-person relay.
Yeah.
And that track was small, and it was banked because it had to fit into the Tarrant County Convention Center. It wasn't anything like this Tyson building that we have here. So you have this small oval with high banks on either end, and you have to run a lot of laps.
To make up for the distance, yeah.
So as I recall, Arkansas was running 4th, and he was the 3rd guy in the relay. And he gets the baton on the home side, starts up that ramp, and comes down. He's just about 3rd when he starts coming down, and then it was like somebody shot him out of a cannon, because he was on the outside, and I just saw him blow through by every one of those guys and come back around, and he did 2 or 3 more laps and handed it off. I don't think Arkansas won the race, but he put him in first. And I talked to John after it was over, and he was just like, he's right. He's really fast, because John knew speed, and he's got track speed. And he was trying to get him to run track, but what he ended up saying to me was that Gary Anderson proved he was fast enough, and he didn't care after that.
Oh, he just wanted to prove him wrong.
Right, but you didn't always see that speed. He had to kick in. We used to call it the afterburners, because that's what you have on a jet engine.
Yeah. And
he would kick the afterburners in every once in a while, and it was just astonishing how much faster an already fast guy can be. So he was pretty remarkable.
I mean, you're really fast if you impress John McDonald.
That's right.
That's
Absolutely.
Hands down, no question about
Absolutely.
it. I love that story, Mike. Brad Hodges asks, will the wide receiver room be SEC good this season, Mike?
Well, there's a lot of hype. If the hype turns out to be true, then yes, they'll be good. You got Isaiah Sategna. And we know what he did in high school. He didn't do much last year in games, but he looked pretty good in the spring. He had that one bomb that KJ, and I've talked about the spring game. I thought the defense kind of dominated the one offense, really limited them a lot.
Yeah.
But on that one play where he got open and KJ had time to throw,
it was amazing.
It was really impressive.
Yeah, you want to talk about track speed? That's a kid with track speed.
Yeah, he's got track speed. Another transfer is this kid out of Texas A&M Commerce, Andrew Armstrong.
Oh, yeah, I really
Okay,
like
the
him.
guy's 6'4" with really good hands, and he's got good speed. And he had over 1,000 yards in catching. Now, that's a division down, but he still, had over 1,000 yards in catches and 13 touchdown passes. They're very excited about him. And then you've got this Isaac Tesla.
There you go. You got it.
Gotta say the name right. Tesla. Also a lower division, but he's 6'4" with good speed and great hands.
Oh, yeah.
And they're very excited about him. The problem with those three guys, and there's some other receivers in there that are good too, but those guys are the ones that everybody's looking at. They're unproven in the SEC. They have to do it first.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that I'm going to be looking at when I go over and watch preseason workouts. Last year we were lucky enough. They had a couple of sessions where we saw kind of a 7-on-7 wide receiver against D-back thing.
Yeah.
And it was in those sessions that we saw those D-backs had problems. They had trouble covering Arkansas's receivers.
We have it on video. I went back and watched some of that.
So it's going to be interesting to see from a couple of standpoints. How good are these receivers, but have the D-backs improved?
Absolutely. And I hope we get to see that again, because that was honestly one of the most telling drills that they did, because otherwise
we don't get to see a lot of stuff like that.
We don't. And people don't understand that. When we get to see the 15, 20 minutes, we only get to see some drills.
Yeah, it's like a few drills, and they always stick the offense on the other end of the field. You can barely see those guys.
Right.
You all see these internet guys, they got goggles
They have
on.
they have these binoculars that they're like zooming into KJ, and you're like, I can't see anything.
Yeah.
I can hardly zoom that much with my camera.
Yeah.
So it's funny. Hot Dogger says, we've been lucky enough to have great sportscasters. Paul Eels, Chuck Barrett. All of these are Razorback icons, but do you remember Bud Campbell? I'm pretty old, so you may not have been around during those days.
Yes, we got the graphics
It's okay. I'll add the
correct
graphics in afterwards. It's fine.
I missed Bud Campbell by 1 year. He was killed. It's really weird that Paul Eels and Bud Campbell are the two big names in Razorback radio play-by-play. And they both died in car accidents. But that happened in 74. I got here in 75. So I missed him by 1 year. However, I do have a Bud Campbell story. When I was at Fort Rucker in 72, I'd been there a while. I was living off the base at a place called Daleville, Alabama. If anybody's ever been there, they know where Daleville is. You go out, I think, west of the West Gate, and the town's there. And I was living in a trailer house because that's all I could afford. And this friend I keep talking about that I grew up with was a Razorback fan. He came out to spend some time with me. He stayed about a week. We both went to North Texas State.
Oh, wow.
So Arkansas was playing North Texas on that Saturday. And we're like, hey, we'd like to see what happens in that game. So he was like, well, we can't pick that up here in Alabama. And I said, well, let's see. And we get in my car, and we start going through the radio dial. We're picking up all these games, and it's not and then finally we find it. And it was Bud Campbell doing the Arkansas-North Texas State game.
That's awesome.
So I heard him, and he was good. Those radio play-by-play guys in those days, that was the golden age of that. Those guys were just mind-blowing good because they could take a game and make you feel like you were watching it, even though you were listening to it in your car.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And he was very good. I only heard him that one time, but he was very good.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a weird coincidence.
Yeah.
When you saw that name, you're like, wait a second, I do know that.
When I got here, I remembered Bud Campbell from that night when we were listening to that game.
That is awesome. I love that. Geoff says, I enjoyed your 5-part series on Dave Jordan, Mike. I'm guessing you had fun putting it together. What was the
Who
best
is this
part?
Geoff character?
You know who he is. You know who he is.
Okay.
Me and Alyssa talked about him.
All right.
You know, she knows.
I'm assuming that Geoff genuinely wants to know the answer to this, and he's not just messing with me.
No, he genuinely wants to know.
Okay.
He did.
You were there. The best part was that sit-down we did with those three guys,
Yeah.
with Norm DeBrine, Dave Van Horn, and Dave Jorn.
Yeah.
In fact, when we started that, at one point I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. I've covered 47 seasons of Razorback baseball. There's only been these two guys. Think about that. Think about all the football coaches I've had to cover, even basketball, you know. Two guys in 47 years, and they're right there. And then the pitching coach was with both of them.
For 20 years.
Yeah, half that time. So I'm sitting there thinking, this is really amazing. But then they got into the funny stuff. Because, and I give Norm a lot of credit for this, because I was talking to him before we did this. And he's the one that told me about Dave Jordan sleepwalking.
That was hilarious.
And we couldn't work that in because it took too long to tell the story. I mean, there is a limitation on how long these things can go. But he told me about this time, I don't know where they were, but they were on the road, and those were, in the old days, they didn't have Frank was a cheapskate. Now, he didn't give them a lot of money. So the coaches had to share a room, and it was a cheap motel, apparently, and a small one, according to Jorn. But he said, Norm said he woke up in the middle of the night and Jorn is walking over his bed.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you doing? And he just walks over his bed. And then George claimed that what happened was he woke up and had to go to the bathroom, and it was dark in there and he didn't know, so he just came to the bed and he just walked over it to go. Now, I think he was probably sleepwalking, because then Van Horn talked about when he was a grad assistant and Jorn was the pitching coach, they were rooming in, again, this small motel room in Austin, getting ready to play in the Southwest Conference baseball tournament. And he said it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. He was sort of asleep, but not totally asleep. And he hears this, all of a sudden he hears a guy go, "Tell them we're here." And he looked over there, and Jordan was sitting up. He'd said that. And he was like, "What are you doing?" And he said, and then he just slowly drops back down and goes to sleep. And Van Horn said, "Man, I was mad because he woke me up and said I got my pillow and started beating him on the head with it." I'm like, cut that out. But they were both single in the 80s and friends. And Jordan said, you know, hey, we set up practice together. And Norm DeRyan admitted, he said, Dave Van Horn came in as a grad assistant and immediately made the defense better, especially in the infield. And then Jordan made the pitching better. And he said that was a big part of why we were better, those two guys. But according to Jordan, they kind of set practice up. I mean, they were doing all the stuff, and then, I don't know, you know, Norm would come out and look around and go, yeah, this is going pretty good. But they said, this is the way they went. They said, you didn't want Norm throwing batting practice. He said, we were both good at it. He said, and then I can't remember which one of them, but one of them said, yeah, he'll hit you.
Yeah, you don't want to hit off Norm because
he'll hit you. Can you imagine, in all the times that I've gone to baseball practice, I don't think I've ever seen a guy get hit.
Nope.
That's got to be like tough. But that's what they said, is that Norm would hit you.
Yeah, that's
so that part of it was funny.
Oh, that was great. It was so cool because, and you can tell me this, Mike, how often do you get to see those three guys in a room together?
Don't.
You don't. Like, you just don't. And that was the coolest thing for me.
And it was fun to go tour the baseball facility
that was really fun.
With all that.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite part, is getting to tour that whole facility, because we got to see things that a lot of people don't get to see.
I mean, Van Horn showed us, he said, this is supposed to be a janitor's closet, but look, it's got a window. So we just made it a grad assistant's office.
Yeah.
He got his own desk.
He's got his own desk. It's beautiful. It's like great. You're like, okay. Yeah. It's awesome. It was really cool. And if you haven't seen that series, you can go watch it on our website, hogville.net. The whole 5-part series is there. It's really good. And Mike worked really hard on it. So go check it out over there. Mousetown says, I saw this photo on Facebook this week taken at the Rangers AA Stadium in Frisco, Texas. Notice the cup holders. Why can't they do something like this at Baum-Walker Stadium, Mike? Tired of holding my Diet Coke in my lap. I am too. I'm very tired of it.
So I actually found that photo and cropped it a little bit so you can see.
Okay.
And we'll display it now.
Yeah, we'll show it right now.
Now, what you'll notice is here, the cup holders are on the back of the seat in front of you. That's where they are.
Right.
So if that only works if the walking aisle that you're on is wide enough so that when you walk through there, you don't bump into the cup holder or bump into the legs of the person sitting there.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that at Baum-Walker. You would have to tear all the seats out and redo the concrete. Because as I said when we got asked this before, when Frank got that stadium built, He wanted a maximum number of fans down from the third base line over to the first base line, right in that concentration, so it would affect the other team's hitters, the other team's pitchers, the other team's infielders. I don't think he worried about the outfielders, but he wanted noise in that area. So he jammed all those seats together. Now, a lot of those seats were added later on down all the way to the foul poles, but originally they didn't have them there. It was just dugout, outside of the dugout to outside of the dugout with a maximum number of people there. So there's not a lot of room there.
No.
When you walk through there, there's no room for cup holders, and there's no room where your armrest is. So again, if it ever changes, here's what will have to happen. And again, the last time I asked about this, I was told, well, if we replace the seats, if at some point we think the seats need to be replaced, we can take them all out and maybe make an adjustment, but you will lose some seats because you're going to have to make them wider. You're going to have to, here's your armrest. You're going to have a cup holder here.
Absolutely,
and then the one for the other guy. Well, if you've got every seat there and you add that much space times how many seats there are in a row all the way from the left foul pole to the right foul pole, you're reducing the number of seats. I don't know how by how much, but you're reducing it. So here's what you're also doing. You're reducing the noise level in there because there are fewer people packed into that space. So for instance, they could put an upper deck up there.
I'd love that.
At some point.
Yes.
But you're still reducing down low what Frank wanted. So here's the question for you as a fan. Mousetown, are you willing to hold your drink in your hand so that Arkansas can continue to have one of the best advantages in baseball? Because Frank knew what he was doing when he had that place built. Now, here's what a lot of people that I see do. They get their soft drink, they stand up there and drink it on the concourse. Yeah. And when they're through, then they go sit back down.
Or they put it right between their feet in the seat.
You can do that too.
Right between your feet.
But there's ways to, so I'm not sure I'm in favor of ever doing that.
Yeah, I think there's also a way, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, with those seats, there's you can almost add with different seats and different stadium venues, you can almost add a little cup holder attachment to a seat. You'd have to look at the seats and do this. And Hunter might.
There's not room for it.
There might not be, but if it flips out, if it folds up, the fold-up cup holders that fold in.
Doesn't matter if you've got your cup in it and some guy's walking by there, he's going to bump into it.
True. I guess it wouldn't be. You'd have to engineer. I bet there's an engineer out there that can figure out the problem. We'll see. Marty Bird's Proxy asks, which of the coaches were least and best composed after a frustrating loss? Stories?
Yeah, I don't know that I can recall a Razorback coach that I would call not composed after a loss, like he'd break down and crying or start screaming at somebody. There's never been that. I can think of some that you could tell they were visibly upset. I mean, Houston Nutt wore his feelings on his shoulder, and a lot of times in a disappointing loss, you could tell he was upset. I think Petrino did it some. Lou Holtz definitely did it some, and he'd get mad from time to time. I don't really have an issue with that. I think fans don't want you to be sitting there after a disappointing loss and be totally detached and act like you have no emotion about that. I think they kind of want you to be upset because they're upset. So I don't think that's an issue. What's an issue is if somebody comes across as being disingenuous after a loss, and that's Chad Morris to a T. The story I would tell is one we all saw. This is not difficult. After the Western Kentucky game, he's in the press conference after the game, and he gets asked, not because we didn't know he was going to get fired that night or early the next morning. He was just asked, do you think you're the right guy to coach this team moving forward for next year? And he went into this big, long thing about why he was. Now, give me a break. He knew in his mind that he was fired at the end of the year. I knew he was. Everybody in the media knew he was. Again, we didn't know it was going to happen the next day, but we knew it was going to happen. And he knew it. So why go into that nonsense where you're trying to sell yourself? What, do you think you're going to say that and Hunter Yurachek's going to look at that press conference and go, oh, I changed my mind. This guy's really cool. So, you don't want that. But I will say, and there was another press conference. Joe Kynes was an interim head coach the year Jack Crow got fired, and it was the year Arkansas entered the SEC. It was a really tough year. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the Tennessee game, one of the biggest upsets of all time. But they won 3 games that year. Joe's biggest problem was And when he looked back on it, I think he admitted this. He tried to, he was the defensive coordinator, and he continued to serve as the defensive coordinator. He didn't put somebody else in charge of the defense. He did it while still being the head coach. So he's running back and forth from his standpoint, working with the defense to watch the offense so he'd know both. And he just wore himself out. He was just exhausted. And we could see it after games as we got further into the year. You could just see this guy was beat. And after the last game, and they actually won that last game pretty convincingly over LSU, but after the last game, he said to us, we're asking questions, he's like, guys, I'm really tired. I'm going to go home and get a lot of sleep, and I'll answer your questions later. And we all understood. We're like, yeah, okay, do that, you know. Now, if somebody did that today, they'd probably be mad, but we understood.
Yeah, I think there's a happy medium between being a baby about a loss, right? You know, throwing a temper tantrum and going in. You know, you have seen coaches that have done that, not here, but you have seen coaches throughout history who have gone in and temper tantrumed at reporters.
Not
right?
here. I can't recall.
Not here. I never said not here, but you can't. There are some that come to mind, but you also think there's a happy medium of like, you're allowed to be upset after a loss, you know? And I've said that, you know, Eric Musselman, sometimes people say he walks in, you can see he's visibly upset.
Yeah, he ducks behind whatever that thing is, the little computer screen. He's looking up and down.
He doesn't look anybody in the face, and I think that's because he's upset and he's angry. But you kind of want him to be like that. You want to see that emotion. They shouldn't be happy. Everyone wants to see that. There's just a happy medium.
There's probably no real good way to handle a loss, but there's a better way than there are worse ways.
There are worse ways, like, you know, I mean.
Again, I think if you're a phony and people can see it, that's the worst thing.
I mean, I've asked my dad before, because there are times where he's, you know.
If Chad Morris had said he was sleepy and tired and wanted to go home, we would have barbecued him.
I know. Yes.
But everybody understood with Joe Kynes, and nobody said anything about it.
Yeah, well, it's also based on your personality, right? And how well liked you are with the media too. Sure. So that all plays a factor into it. But I appreciate you for telling those stories on the show today, Mike. That's going to do it for Ask Mike this week. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.